Hi, I'm Danny and we're looking at Luxology's Modo 301, and what we're going to be doing is we're going to be going for some very basics in Modo just to get the new starters in Modo to get started. So what we're going to do in the first tutorial is to literally just have a look around Modo just to see where things you would find in other applications are in Modo. So this would be like where's the primitive tools, how do you rotate and navigate around the interface and such forth. So the first thing we need to do is look at this top area here where the tabs are. We can see that currently we're in the render screen. We've got an animate, UV, paint, viewport group, which is something I've added myself, and model. Now obviously the model screen is probably the first screen that you see when you come into Modo. So this is the actual area which can be talking out first. So first of all, to get around the 3D viewport, we simply just hold down the Alt key, and you can see the cursor changes there to a rotation. So we can just hold the left mouse button down and freely rotate. Now by default, Modo uses what's called a trackball rotation method, and it's found in here. You just click on the OpenGL and you move down, and we've got trackball rotation. Now at the moment you can see that mine is not selectable. This is because I've turned this off within the actual system settings of Modo because I don't like it. It's a personal choice, but I prefer the traditional method of rotating, which is more of a fixed plane method. So to pan around, we hold the Alt key and hold the Shift key simultaneously, and then just press the left mouse button in, held down and move, we can actually pan. So the combination of rotating and panning is very easy. Now if you want to zoom, smooth zoom in, you hold down the Alt and the Control key, and you can see that the cursor changes to a magnifying glass, and wherever you've got your cursor is to where it's going to zoom in. Obviously you can more do a step zoom in with the mouse wheel itself. So that's about it really, just to get around the actual 3D interface. So what about the quad viewport that you would normally see? Well, Modo can actually work in a full quad viewport, but you don't have to do it in Modo because we've got this axis plane here that you can see. And what we're looking at is this grid, this like wireframe grid, and what this does is enables you to work at a fixed axis when you're doing things. For instance, if I was to draw a plane right now on the screen, it would actually draw it according to the front fixed axis. You can see here between the Y and the Z axis. And if you look at the bottom left, you can see there's an indication there that this white transparent plane here is showing that we are in that orientation. If I was to rotate now to look more above, you can see that this grid plane actually changes. You can now see that we're working on the axis between the X and the Z. Now what does this really mean in real life? Well, I'll just quickly show you. Now bearing in mind that the tools I'm just going to use right now, I'm going to go into more depth later on. So I'm just going to get a primitive for now, and I'm just going to draw out while I'm on this axis, and you can see that it's actually drawing it according to this axis here. So just undoing that, if I was to move down to this axis now and then draw out the plane again, you can see that it's actually drawing it on that. So we can literally choose what axis we want merely by rotating the viewport in the direction that we want. Obviously you can have your quad view as well, and to be quite honest with you, it's something that I've not had to use at the moment. It's pretty easy to just work in one viewport, which means you've got the maximum view size to work in. However, if you wanted to work in a quad, you can actually have this selected. Now in Modo, I believe 201 or 202, by default we've actually got the quad viewport up here. I've changed a few things in this interface, so it's not actually up here at the moment, but however I'm just going to show you a layout for the default 201 layout, and to show you that we do have access to a quad viewport here. So we can actually work like this, And you don't even have to change this layout anyway to get this. You can just make your own viewports and layouts as and when you want to, but I've just chosen this just for the speed of things, that to show you that it is available. Obviously everything's real time as you would expect it. Pressing the A key when you're over any viewport automatically zooms on everything in your scene. If you have more than one thing in your scene and you want to zoom on a specific object in your scene, then you just make sure that one's selected, and then you simply hold down the shift and then the A key, and that will zoom on that particular object. So that kind of deals with this viewport. I'm just going to go back to my previous layout, which is the 301 default layout, and we're going to undo a couple of the things that we've just done there. We don't need these anymore. So that kind of gets you around here. Now the beauty about working within Modo is you can actually have the full screen for each individual part or session that you want to do within Modo, i.e. when you're modeling you've got the full screen, when you're painting you've got the full screen, when you're making your UV maps you've got the full screen to do just specifically that task. Even when you animate and render, we've actually got a reasonable layout already there for you to use and work with. However, you can actually change and modify things according to the way you want to work. For instance, if I wanted to split this viewport in half, I can literally just hold down the control key, drag to the right, and then we've actually got a split screen. We can then change this to a different perspective, different view shall I say, so the front. Or indeed we can actually change what type of panel this is going to be. So we can say change it to a render try view, and obviously it's going to take over depending on what kind of view that you're trying to select. In this case we didn't actually want this, so I'm just going to go back and put this back to where it was. We want a model single. Hold down the control key, we'll drag to the right. How about if we want to split it across this way? Well, hold the control key, drag it downwards, and you can see that now we've got 3 views. We can just do the same for this, and now we've got 4. So you can see how easy it is to save up or to create your new viewports. This is actually modifying the original one. So if I wanted to make a separate one, it's very easy to do. I just create a brand new tab. So I just want to close some of these down. I'm just right clicking on this little tiny dot you can see up in the top left. Delete that. I've got my standard perspective view. We come to here, we can add a new tab. So we're going to have a model view here. So we've got model and we've got a model view in which we can then split it accordingly to the way we want it to be. So you can see that it's very, very simple in the way that we can do things in Modo, but I don't want to jump into too many of these additional things at the moment because we can easily jump ahead too far. There's so many things that we can go through in Modo, and we don't want to confuse the matter at the moment. So at the moment we've just gone through some very basics that you can actually get around Modo with ease within the 3D viewport, and we're able to move between different panel screens and alter the actual screens ourselves to the way we want to work. If we just look to the right here, this is a very important area of Modo, and essentially we're going to be using this a lot. This is actually the shader view. This is where we set up our shaders and our render settings. This will be covered in more depth later on. The items view shows you what items we currently have on the screen. These are normally called meshes. Each time you create or draw a new item onto the screen, it will go into what's called a mesh layer. Now by default, when you load up Modo, a mesh is already there ready for a new object to be brought into. However, any additional objects that we make will be put into the same mesh. So what we would have to do is make a new mesh for each individual object. Now, one thing that must be stated is when you bring an import an object into Modo, it automatically makes its own mesh and own layer. So it's not going to be something you tediously have to keep on doing. It's only when you're making new objects within Modo that you want to have a new mesh, or if you don't mind, have them integrated into the same layer. So for instance, I've now got two items in Modo now, and they're both within the same layer. So when I actually select this item, it selects all of the items I've currently made. However, they're not permanently stuck together, they can be separated, and that's something I'm going to go more into in the next tutorial.